Yeah, I mean this is my normal uniform. This is like
Yeah,
pretty much what I wear every day. So,
that is true.
uh,
So I really just copied you.
yeah, I mean you can't go wrong with a black T-shirt. I mean,
You really can't,
you know,
especially on video, on online video recordings.
I know, right? Um, so how you doing?
Well,
What's your day like?
after it's been a day,
Yeah.
but this is one of the bright spots of the day. It's too bad I have a job that I have to do. If it
Jobs
wasn't for that
suck.
job, which I actually do love doing the job, it's just too bad there's work involved.
Yeah, I mean jobs especially suck when there's work involved.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, so well, thanks for coming on here and doing this with me. For I guess we should just kind of start out by talking about what this is and what we're doing here.
yeah,
Um, so I'm Caleb. This is Josh, and pretty much every week we get on a phone call and we talk about projects that we're working on. We talk about movies that we've seen, just various different things, all the things movie related. And so we just kind of got the idea that maybe we'll just jump on a podcast and record this. And it's very like informal, nothing like super polished or anything like that. But we love talking about movies, and so here we are.
I haven't prepared at all. So in terms of informal, I'm just living.
We're just here.
Yeah,
This is like our typical Zoom call that we get on, and yeah, we always catch up on the projects that we're doing
yeah.
and what's going on in the movie, the film industry, because that's what we're basically here to talk about. So, so are you working on anything right now beyond our our usual stuff? Like, what are you working on this week that's kind of stressing you out?
Oh, so I have a couple post production related jobs, and one of them is this. Well, also one of them is like post supervising, and I cover for the editor, some of the editors when they're out of town, which is nice this time because it's something called Celebrity Dad Jokes, which is like a fun, which is like a, it's gonna have some, um, it's gonna get some eyes on it. It's a
Hmm.
good editing project. So I was almost happy to take on that extra work and get a little extra um, credit and stuff like that. But it's definitely just more work.
Yeah,
More
just
work.
add it to your pile of work.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that's one of the problems working freelance is like, you've got like a normal job, but then you're taking on extra side projects,
yeah,
and sometimes like you never really know how much time you're going to have to put into it.
yeah,
Whether it's whether I'm doing like a video production or a film job, or you're doing an editing job or something like that. You always kind of have an idea of like how much time
yeah,
it's going to take, but it always takes more time than that. So it's nice to have the money,
yeah,
but at the same time, like, and that's one of the problems. You don't want to say no. It's hard to say
yeah.
no to money.
And as I get older, I think one of the other things I realize is it's hard to gauge how much energy it's actually going to take. I actually believe like, oh, I'll go home and edit. I'll finish one thing and I'll finish the rest later. And no, it's like it's 8 o'clock and I'm exhausted and it's time to just watch TV and
Right.
try to relax. But what about you? What's
Yeah.
your week other than delivering uh, a third script in a year, right? Unless I'm counting wrong.
Yeah. I sent over. So I've been doing a lot of writing lately, and partially I'm able to do that because I'm taking on less paying jobs, and that's kind of the trade off, right?
Right.
Is the more paying jobs you take, the less time you have for the indie filmmaking.
Yeah.
And so, I've had to take that sort of sacrifice or make that sacrifice of, well, I'm going to take less photo, video jobs and spend more time in front of the computer writing. And so I've been doing that for a while now. But yeah, I just finished up the first draft of a dark comedy political
Nice.
thriller called Wild Sky, and I sent that over to Josh to
Yes, you did.
give me notes on. So I know it's a lot of work just to review a script, just to read a script and then make notes and all that stuff. So, just for all of you out there listening, if anyone is willing to read your script, that's I mean that's about as much as you can ask for at
Yeah.
this point, because it does take a lot of time and effort. And so, thank you, Josh. I'm very appreciative of your notes. And the other thing I sent over to you is a short film.
Yes.
Uh,
I have my reading cut out for me, you know.
yes, and I'll give a shout out to Ron Rave in case he listens to
Yes.
this, because he's sort of been inspiring me to get out there and put out a high quality short film. And I was a little bit hesitant at first because, like, for me, we want to focus on feature films, and it feels like in a way to kind of taking a step back. But I started to think about it a little bit last week, and came up with some ideas, and I just kind of got the bug to write. So I spent a couple of days this week just kind of busting out a first draft of a short film, and I'm kind of excited about it because this is the first time in many years that I've written and directed a short film.
Yeah. Since college, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, which obviously work on a ton of short films in
Yeah.
in, in film school, um, but mostly other people's too.
Yeah.
You've got your thesis project and some other projects that you've got to deliver. But yeah, film school was just a time for working on a ton of different projects.
Yeah.
So, um, did you get a chance to read that yet? Did I
I
send
haven't
over
had a
to you?
chance
No.
to. I was. I didn't even have the mic set up before we started this. I
That's
logged
true.
on and the mic I was. Caleb was like, "What about your microphone?" I'm like, "I don't know. It seems the computer has a microphone," and it dawned on me that I'm
Yeah,
supposed to set this up.
yeah,
Yeah, nailed it.
yeah.
That was weird.
Oh, what happened?
It said some error message came up. Oh, we're recording again.
Yes.
The Twilight Zone. That was weird. It said error
Okay.
message. You need to refresh, and then it did the
Okay.
whole like, "Do you want to refresh?" And now I'm back. I
Okay.
don't know. That's weird.
Well, this is our first time doing this. We're using Riverside to record this
Just
because we're
always
both.
hold whatever position you get cut out in, and then
I know. Well, we'll try to cut this together.
yeah,
Um, I mean,
it's
I'm not gonna spend a ton of time editing this, but
yeah,
yeah, the so where were we? Talking about the script. So
yes,
Josh and I decided that we wanted to write a script together. So you want to tell us a little bit about that?
yes. Within like rain, right? This is the um. Well, we were inspired. One, we went to AFM to pitch some films to a couple distribution companies out there, and AFM was in Vegas this year, and so we're rooming together. I actually loved it in Vegas, even though it's not going to be in
Yeah.
Vegas anymore, apparently, or like
Yeah.
at least next year. I enjoyed it. Anyway, we roomed together. So after for the first few days, there's all these like seminars that you can attend. And after attending some of those, we went back to the hotel room and we cracked open
Mhm.
like I think a couple six packs of beers and just watched films. It was honestly like it
Yeah.
was like
Yeah.
summer camp. I could have done this, you know, it was great.
It was
Uh,
like study abroad in Paris
it
all over
it
again.
was, which for the anyone who was being introduced to us for the first time, that is where Caleb and I met, was in a film class that took place in Paris. That was our first. Technically, we might have crossed paths before that, but that was like our first. Like, okay, you're
Yeah.
roommates together, and
Yeah, I had never met you. I didn't really know who you were exactly,
yeah,
other than when someone mentioned that you were the guy who did the sci-fi film. That was all
nice.
I knew. And I was like, "Oh, that guy." But I hadn't seen that
Yeah,
film, and then you showed it to me on the trip. But yeah, so Josh, for his senior thesis film, he did kind of an ambitious sci-fi film that was actually pretty good. Um,
thank you.
Especially for a student film.
Yeah,
Lots of visual effects and some different, um, yeah, I mean, you want to tell us about it real quick?
Yeah,
What it
it
was?
was called Leaving Earth, and I've actually I've actually dived back in recently into listening and reading hard science fiction, and at the time didn't know what that term meant, but it was technically a hard science fiction, where it's about these astronauts that are trying to get to the closest hospitable planet, and of course
Hmm.
they're aging throughout the trip. So the idea is just to go check the planet, and basically it's a one way trip. You're gonna it's a suicide mission, but it's for the greater good. Um,
Hmm.
and it was definitely way too ambitious for a college short film. But I learned a lot. Like I learned a lot of like VFX and stuff like that. I still tweak it. I still actually open up the project. I've managed to resave it and and I
Yeah,
still open it up and add a couple shots here and there just to see if I could still do
yeah,
it. And I'll finish it
yeah,
again, the remastered
yeah.
version in a few years. But
The George Lucas cut.
yeah, exactly right. Just keep tweaking it till the end of
Yeah.
time, until AI can just do all
So
of it.
anyway, like Josh's film was kind of like notorious,
Nice.
infamous,
Wow.
at CU Boulder, and I'd kind of heard about it, even though I hadn't seen it. I didn't know Josh, and so when we finally met up, we were roommates in our Paris class, and yeah, he had it on his
Yeah.
laptop, showed it to me and everything, and that's how we kind of bonded, because we were both like had this like passion for visual effects,
Yep.
and we were both kind of doing some kind of crazy ambitious films in film school. So yeah, that was what was that, 2012?
2012. Yeah.
2012. So
So
yeah, it's been 13 years of friendship and working on
yeah,
projects together. So it's been great.
we made well. This is the short film. This is the last short film I made about pie. That you are the producer and cinematographer, and all around
Mhm.
the only other person who was there every goddamn day. But
Yes.
that short film we ended up not just like turning into the feature film, but it was actually the opening. It was a part of the feature film.
Yeah, we
Um,
shot the Raspberry Pi scene,
yep,
right?
yep,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, so that yeah, we worked on that in kind of our spare time on the weekends, and yeah, it took a couple of
Oh,
years to
took 5. Technically, from the short film to the end, it took 5. And the lesson we learned, or the lesson, and this is a lesson that even other professionals, filmmakers who see the film will say, like, "Man, you guys had a lot of
Mhm.
locations." So we learned
Yes.
our lesson because the film's about a guy going on a bunch of different pie dates, and they're all these select chapters, um, and each setting has a different location for each pie date or experience that he goes through. So
Yeah.
that made it much more difficult. That was
Yes.
in our heads. It seemed like, oh, then we'll do another one on a
Yep.
few weeks from now, and then we'll do another one. But no, it actually
Yeah.
made it significantly harder to keep it going. So that's something I'm very proud of, is the fact that we somehow
Yeah.
kept it going long enough to finish it. um, but
What were some of the other challenges that, I know on a lot of the producing side, in terms of just the setting up those locations, and hiring the cast and crew, that was mostly you that handled that. So what were some of the challenges with that?
Yeah, eventually, some of the challenges were uh, casting became a tough one, because something we learned when making the film was the chemistry between
Hmm.
two actors. So it required me to do a lot of the actual auditioning process and then working with them. And we definitely learned our lesson with a few of the actors and actresses. I won't name them, but like,
Hmm.
that you instantly knew, like, oh, this doesn't have the same feel
Yeah.
or same, like, chemistry as, whereas where there were other people were like, well, the scenes could have just gone on forever.
Yeah.
And that was a challenge. I'm also just not very good at scheduling, and like that is not my thing.
Yeah.
Luckily, my wife was brought on, not my wife at the time, but she's a producer, and that's exactly what she's good at, keeping people on schedule and
Yes.
organized. We had a heragram. We had to keep track of, and the reason
Yeah.
I guess, like, we should say I acted in this film. I guess
Yes.
it's I can admit now that I do like acting a little bit. I just
Yeah.
don't like the idea of going to auditions and being an actor, but I
Yeah.
thoroughly enjoy, like, having fun and
Hmm.
exploring like the creative side of it. But the reason I was in it was because I knew I would show up, and I wouldn't
Yes.
cut my hair, or would cut my hair when I needed to. That was like and I was
Yes.
free. That was
Yes.
and the short film was to prove that it wasn't going to be stupid. We shot the short film to make sure
Hmm.
wasn't going to be a waste of our time, and it was a good short film. It was,
And I think one of the other things that we talked about early on was, this, like, some of these things are like loosely based on
yeah,
your real life,
yeah,
right?
oh yeah,
So you were actually taking these women out on pie dates and
yeah,
so forth, and then you were telling me about this, and I was like, oh, this like sounds like a good web series because you
yes,
could do these little
yes,
episodes, but then like web series aren't really a thing anymore. But at the time when we first started talking about this, it sounded like a thing we could throw together, like a bunch of episodes that are 7 to 10 minutes
yeah,
long and so forth. And then the more that we kind of cultivated this idea, I was just like, this is a movie,
yeah,
and I'm so glad that it ended up that way
yeah,
because like
same,
um it's just not impactful like when you see each individual date, but when you see the whole character arc of your character, it all works together,
yeah,
right? Even though it's very episodic in nature, it's not like a traditional 3 act structure at all, but like the movie just works.
yeah. It ended
Um,
as we went along and learned and it's funny, all the books we've been reading on like writing and and working together and learning how the beats of a script and everything, it actually does follow it fairly well, a
yeah,
lot of those things. But that took a lot of like editing and being able to
yeah,
just throw stuff in the trash basically. And
yeah,
there's definitely, when you say like it's loosely based, some is loosely based on my experiences, some is not loose at all. It's very
yeah,
much real.
just
Like that's exactly how it happened.
yeah.
I just relived it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting premise for sure, though. And, being in LA, I think
Yeah.
you have that advantage that we could go to all these different
Yeah.
locations, right? And I'm not sure would have been as easy in another city because of all the like, just all the cool locations that whether it's the actual, pie dates, where it's the, restaurants and cafes and all of these different things. But we're definitely able to get some interesting locations,
Yeah.
um, that I don't know that we would have been able to if it was in another city, or at least not as easily.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot of visually, like, just fun things to look at in that movie, and that's what kind of for me made it kind of a fun movie to shoot because it was never like it was never boring. Every weekend we showed up and there was a
Yeah.
new location, and there's definitely a lot of challenges with that because like
Yeah.
we didn't get to scout it ahead of
Yeah.
time. A lot of times we just see some photos online, and then we show up and it's like, oh shit, this is going to be really difficult. And sometimes it was like, oh wow, this is really cool. This is better than what I expected. So there's a lot of surprises
Yeah.
along the way in doing that. Um, so yeah, very much kind of like ad hoc sort of
Yeah.
filmmaking, with that one, and I think I think both of us learned a lot from that we can kind of learn what we can take with us in the future and like what not to
Yeah.
do.
I recently was talking to someone who specifically commented the cinematography on it, by the way.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
And
Yeah,
instantly
it was a
knew it was like from the school of thought, at least from
yeah,
Roger Deakins. So that was
yeah,
cool. Instantly they got that
nice.
part, which was, I didn't have to bring it up. It was inherent, which I like.
Yeah, the Roger Deakins sort of inspiration is more based on the comedies that he shot.
Yeah.
We talked about this at length. How his work with the Coen
Yeah.
brothers. Um, he would shoot with wide angle lenses, and typically like in a two shot, like if we're looking at like I'm talking to you right now, I'm sitting across from you, so to speak,
Yeah.
and normally you would stick a camera behind me and you maybe get a little bit of my shoulder in there and you do over the shoulder so that you could kind of get, a sense of both characters in the frame. But what Deakins likes to do is he would like to put the camera in the middle in between us.
Yeah.
And so we really kind of leaned into that. And what it does is like, it kind of gives you this like distortion,
Yeah.
but it exaggerates your movement, exaggerates the size of your hands as you're talking and everything like that, and sort of has a subconscious feel to it, and it works in a comedy, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily work all the time, but so we really leaned into that visual aspect of that because it is a comedy, and I definitely think that works. I
Yeah.
think that was the right choice.
I think
Uh,
they, yeah, I absolutely think it was the right choice. Because conversations, that's how conversations happen. They don't happen over the shoulder.
right.
There are films where
Yeah.
that is, of course,
Yep.
um, especially if a voyeuristic film and stuff like that, where that makes sense.
Yes.
But
Yeah, like a Jason
yeah,
Bourne type of
yes,
thriller or
exactly.
something
There's
like
just, it's a
that. You know,
stylistic
it's
choice as opposed to just like the
yep.
default.
Yeah.
But yeah, but back to the locations, the
Yes.
multiple locations, which again, like I do agree with you. It had it gave a lot of texture to the film.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we were sitting in this hotel room. The day was done at AFM, and I'd seen part of this film on Hulu called Skinamarink, and I wanted to show it to you because I was like, this film was made for 15 grand.
Yeah.
Got some midnight screenings and made, I think, either 1.7 or $2 million. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a I I'm not I it has there's some parts that of it that are definitely scary and definitely like or atmospherically creepy.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, it's a very experimental film.
Yes.
There it's a and that's because it was made for 15 grand. But it was inspiring. I was like, first of all, look, one location, two
Yep.
actors, like two kids, but
Two
the
kids in a
two
house.
kids in a house. That's all it took. And I would say like there's the equivalent, the opposite end of that where those guys who they wait for something to go into the public domain like Winnie the Pooh, and then they make a Winnie the
Mm-hmm.
Pooh horror film,
Right.
for, I don't know, like I've heard 50 grand, but I actually saw a trailer for a Bambi one the other day. I was like, this
Mm-hmm.
looks like more than 100. This looks like a few $100,000. This is not,
Yeah.
but there's like this like middle ground somewhere where something is not just so experimental where um but not so just like B movie. There's
Mm-hmm.
you know utilizing one location to make um a creepy but interesting horror film. I don't want to say like horror, but almost like the Lighthouse is a great reference, like
Yeah.
um that type of horror, the Igmar Bergman
Yeah.
type of horror.
Yeah. And to a kind of adjacent to that would be like something like Paranormal Activity
Right.
that was also done for,
Yeah.
something like 15
Yep.
grand, something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they ended up spending a lot more than that in post production once it was picked up by Blumhouse, but at the same time it was like, you know, you can make these kind of films for a very minimal amount of
Yeah.
money, but really what makes it work is either a really interesting concept, like in the case of Skinamarink,
Yeah.
or a really good script, which in the case of Lighthouse, again, like I mean, obviously that had the visuals that
Yeah.
just like were just amazing, like the production design and the cinematography and everything about that. um, and then in addition to, two really great actors.
Yeah.
So I mean, you have a lot going on that with that, but at the same time, like if you didn't start out with a really good script, you have no movie.
Yeah.
Just put two guys in a lighthouse, like okay, now what?
Yeah.
um so so yeah, I mean, just to kind of like touch on what you're talking about with this inspiration of Skinamarink, we both decided, let's come up with something,
Yeah.
you know that's similar in concept to this idea of like a small cast, small crew, single location sort of thing. And so where are we at on the script with that?
Well, the first thing we did is we both
Yeah.
sat in bed and tried to write individual ideas.
Yes.
We decided yours was better, so we ran with your idea. Um, you got about 70 pages in, um, and from that point, I started kind of going in and just reordering a few things and adding, obviously, like going in and adding some more like ideas that
Hmm.
I had that we do this like weekly calls. So like I present some of these ideas to you and then
Yeah.
like start incorporating them in and like bounce ideas off you. So now I guess we're about probably 80 pages in.
Okay.
I'm through the first, I would say not the first two, like I'm at the end of the second act, because
Okay.
that's honestly the third act is where that's actually the most open part of the script at this point. I've actually
Hmm.
we've talked about this too, but the ending, I have a little bit of the ending, or just the ending, um, and I just got to fill in that
Yeah,
last little,
we know how, yeah, we
yeah,
know how it's gonna end. It's just like the things leading up to the
yeah,
climax and all of that stuff are a little bit more
yeah.
questionable at this point.
What I
Um,
want to get it to is get it to that point where it doesn't matter, like not that it doesn't matter, where like you get it to a point where like the setup is strong, what's brought you up to that, maybe like, just after the midpoint of the film is so strong that
mhm.
you we can just start playing with what's interesting, like what strange things could people be experiencing while dealing with, this horrifying element, um similar to some of the films that you sent me to watch. um
Yeah,
and like the lighthouse is another really good reference. At some point, once they establish that the boat has missed them and they're stuck there,
right.
the everything starts falling apart, and it falls apart in a way that almost doesn't have, I mean, it makes sense, but like they just start going crazy, and it
Yeah.
doesn't. And what they say about people going crazy, you don't know you're going crazy, right? So at some point, the
Hmm.
guy, when Robert Pattinson's character wakes up, he asks, like, when's the boat coming? And
Hmm.
Willem Dafoe says, "We missed it weeks ago," and he's like, "What are you?" So
Right.
they build in that little aspect of like, you don't know you're going crazy because that's not how crazy
Right.
works. So
Yep.
that's that sweet spot I want to build on, because I think that's like
Yeah.
that's the that's what's going to sell it. That's what's going to make it a movie that you watch and leave with like good questions, not just questions, but good, like, fun questions asked, like, wait, what the hell just happened? Or is that what I
Yeah.
thought? Is that what I thought at the end? Which for Skinamarink.
Yeah. And so it's sort of this like genre blending of thriller and horror.
Yeah.
But what makes it a little bit different, is that, and both of us, I think we agreed on this early on, that like you never really want to show the monster,
Yeah.
right? Because sometimes that can work. I mean, in horror films, almost always you have to show the monster, because that's like
Yeah.
the main element. But like in a movie, like again, like The Lighthouse or something like that, you don't ever see a monster. It's like what's happening in your psyche, what's
Yeah.
happening, that's causing this like mental breakdown. And it could be an internal or an external force that's causing that. And in in our script, the idea is that it's sort of it's sort of an external force, right? But there's also like this trouble. There's also this like this trouble within the family,
Yeah.
right? And so that sort of mirrors it. But yeah, I mean, I do like that idea where you don't really know, like, what's real and what's not. What is reality? What is the dream world? At what point do you get to that where, again, Robert Pattinson says, like, like, where's the boat? And it's like, oh, yeah, well, it should have came weeks ago. It's like, okay, well, how much time has passed? What are the things that
Yeah.
are going on that are making these characters in this situation? And so I think that there's like more interesting elements to explore in the human psyche than there is
Yeah.
in a monster movie per
Yeah.
se, because that's very flat. That's very like, one dimensional. It's like the people versus the monster. And that can be very entertaining, but I think that, at least for the type of movies that
Yeah.
I like a layered approach, a more nuanced thing where you leave the film and you're still thinking about it,
Yeah.
you know. And
Yeah.
that was the thing with Skinamarink, is like the way it ends,
Yeah. It has a
it's
good ending.
like you're just like left going, what the fuck,
Yeah.
like what's going on here? And then you want to go back and you want to watch it again because like in case you missed something.
Yeah.
But uh, those are the types of films that are interesting to me.
I realized that when I've seen movies, sometimes my initial reaction as I'm walking out of the theater, will be like, "Oh my god, I don't know. I don't know about this. I don't know about that. I don't know if like start
Hmm.
to like nitpick stuff." And then I'll talk about it like the entire drive home, like nonstop.
Yeah.
And that's when I'm like,
Hmm.
"Oh wait, no, I think I love that movie. I can't stop talking about
Right.
it." I'm just it's
Yeah.
Nope was a good one for that, where
Yeah.
the end is, not what you expect event, like
Right.
even when if you can kind of guess it up to the last part, the last like few, like I want to say 15 minutes or something is
Hmm.
much different than you think it's going to be. And that's what exactly what I was like. I don't know. And then I talked about it for like I think probably 2 days, and it's one of my
Yeah.
favorite movies.
Oh, it's absolutely genius. And without spoiling it for anyone who
Right.
who hasn't seen it, um, it's not what you expect. And if I were to explain to you how that movie ended, it wouldn't sound horrifying to you, right? You would probably laugh. It kind like just the
Yeah.
premise of how it ends is
Right.
kind of comical, but what the way that it's presented
Yeah.
on screen is just absolutely horrific.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different techniques that they use that make it work, and that's the genius of you know Jordan Peele's
Yeah.
work. I mean, he's a master filmmaker as far as I'm concerned, but it is something that's so absurd yet extremely terrifying.
Yeah.
And and there's a couple of things that we've talked about with our film that are sort of similar to me, where it's like this is absolutely absurd, but like the way that you present it
Yeah.
on screen, whether it's a combination of the visuals and the sound design and everything like that, it can be like absolutely terrifying. Who's great at that as well is David Lynch.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
like another one of those things where like if you explain a certain scene in Twin Peaks to somebody,
Right.
they might just laugh, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, what are you even talking about? Why is that scary? Or like something like in Mulholland Drive, like the vagrant behind the diner, right? If I were to just kind of explain to you what the scene is, you would be like, why is that scary? But then like it happens and you're like, oh my God, this is just absolutely horrific, you know?
Cheers and rest in peace. Like I actually felt I had
Yeah.
a this like I there's not many people who pass away and you have spend the day being sad. Like, there's,
Hmm.
you read it but to David Lynch,
Yeah.
you had a huge effect, I think, definitely on your career. And I think
Hmm.
your love of David Lynch made me kind of go back and watch more David Lynch and appreciate it differently. So,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it's really sad, not only how that he passed, but the way he passed, he
yeah,
was in pretty bad shape for a long time with emphysema. um but yeah, it's kind of interesting because like I always say, like the two that there's so many filmmakers out there that have influenced me over the years, but for me the top two are Steven Spielberg and David Lynch, and two
wow,
completely
different,
different
yeah,
styles of filmmaking, but just completely different approaches, in terms of like what you can do with the medium. And I think that's really inspiring to me, because like film can be so many different
yeah,
things in so many different ways. It doesn't have to be one thing, and you don't have to be like, even within a genre, there's certain elements and rules, so to speak, but like that doesn't constrain you to
yeah,
just stick with those, right? And again, like David Lynch's films rarely stuck into a single genre. It was
for
just
sure,
his genre was film,
yeah, yeah,
and and he was an artist more than a director or anything like that. It's he was, yeah, it was a true artist. So um yeah, and over the years, the more I've watched his films, the more like connected I've been to that type of filmmaking as well. Hang on a sec, I can't hear you. Can you hear me? I can't hear you. Did you resume this? Yeah, I don't know what happened. I just got a notification and then I couldn't hear you,
Yeah. Who
but now I can
knows?
hear you.
Yeah.
Goddamn technology. It's supposed to fucking make everything better, and it just is a pain in the ass
Makes
all
it
the
way
time.
worse.
Nothing ever works the way it's supposed to. Anyway,
You seem not synced on my end. I don't know if that's going to matter to the recording.
really?
Oh, no, you're good. You're good now. Maybe it just needed a
Okay.
buffer and catch up. Okay. Jesus.
Yeah.
I was right in
Well,
the middle of saying something about I love like there's when you see filmmaking, right? When you and I dare all right, let me segue this a little bit. One, I had an
yeah.
idea. I don't know if I should share it, but I'm going to share a little bit of it.
Okay.
Instead of showing the monster in our film that we're working
Mm-hmm.
on, show this like every time you see something and it's vague, it changes.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like if we do that in that script, it actually adds a little bit to that, like changes slightly, and that adds. Obviously, I don't think like in a way that makes it doesn't seem like it's like morphing. It just every
Mm-hmm.
time it's seen briefly, it's something slightly different about it, which might
Yeah.
add to that the psychological. Is this something people are just it's like when something you catch something in the corner of your eye. I wanted to get that out
Yeah.
there before I start diving into the next part of
Yeah.
this thought, which might lead us into the rest of our discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I do love something about David Lynch um, and many movies that I love, where you see the filmmaking as part of the film. It's not trying to and that is like some filmmaking, like what you say, like Gravity or
Mm-hmm.
The Revenant, where the goal is not to see the filmmaking; it's supposed to feel as immersive and as real as possible. And I like those. I'm not saying like obviously those like Gravity's an amazing and the Revenant and so many
Yeah.
other films in that vein. Dune, like it's these are
Mm-hmm.
amazing films. It's not but I do also, and I think this comes from like watching like films growing up and seeing the filmmaking. You would catch little pieces of the filmmaking process.
Sure.
Those, in the '70s, the big crane shots, but you can kind of see the
Yeah.
camera turning. Like
Yeah.
the turning a little bit, and it didn't matter. You were like, you're like, wow, look at all these actors. They got to do all this shit. This is great.
Right.
You know, and
Yeah.
like that. That was like part of it. That was
Yeah.
and a film that came out this year, which I haven't actually finished, but I watched an hour and maybe half of it, and I was like, this should win Best Picture. I instantly thought like, oh my god, this film, and that was The Brutalist.
The brutalist. Okay.
I you're when you're watching it, it's you see the filmmaking, and that was something I loved about
Mm-hmm.
David Lynch. You would see some of the filmmaking while you were
Yeah.
watching the movie. And I'm not saying because and you could say Steven Spielberg is the complete opposite. You don't, especially like maybe in the early
Mm-hmm.
films, but as he went on, like you're not supposed to see the filmmaking as you watch it. And
Yeah, it's very invisible,
yeah,
and Spielberg likes to use the oneers, and that
yeah,
really helps too because it kind of keeps you
yep.
engaged. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and I love those. I mean, I in terms of being a movie critic, I can have, especially I think after making a movie and just realizing how goddamn hard it was to
Hmm.
get the thing. Like you can appreciate more about any filmmaking process or accomplishment. Not to say that I don't like absolutely not like some films sometimes or feel like
Yeah.
they could have just done this and this and this so much better.
Hmm. Sure.
Um, you know, the did you watch Presents?
Presence.
All right,
Oh, the no, I didn't.
we'll save it.
I
We'll
didn't
save
see
that
it yet.
discussion for another
Okay.
time then. But
Yes.
the brutalist, like the part of the film, especially in the beginning and the scenes, is it's there's an awareness of the camera, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually loved that. I loved seeing the artistic choices in it. I don't know, like it was. But this might start a discussion of our Oscar reactions. But
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, go for it. So you said, you've seen The Brutalist only about halfway through.
mhm,
You should definitely finish it.
definitely should finish it.
Uh it was one of my favorite movies of the year, and when I think back to the Oscar nominees in particular, I do think that that should have won Best Picture. No disrespect to the other films, of course, and I understand it's a democratic process.
Yeah.
I'm not a voter. Um,
It's
I
also a
don't
weird
get it.
democratic it's
Yeah,
what is it? Like each vote counts for a point. So if
yeah,
a film could still win by getting just a lot of second place votes.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's
Whatever
true.
that's called.
Yeah, it's complicated, but nonetheless, like if I were a voting member of the Academy, um, I would have chosen that as my top pick.
Yeah.
But it's still not like my personal favorite movie of the year, which I think we've talked about this. Like my favorite movie of the year was Challengers.
Oh,
Um,
yes. Yes. And that is an absolute snub. I
yeah,
left that movie like, well, man, good for
right,
these people. They're about to win a
right,
fucking Academy Award. Like I was like,
yeah,
I literally left the movie. And the last time I did that was Everything Everywhere All at
yeah,
Once. I left Challenge. I was like, dude, that writer who made this really weird video that
hmm,
called a Potion Master, like
yeah,
where he's just like talking to himself, and it's like a distorted video, and so he like goes like this, and
hmm,
it distorts, and he's just talking to himself.
yeah,
One of my supervisors loves it and periodically
yeah,
watches it, but he wrote
nice,
that Challengers, and I was like, dude, that
yeah,
weirdo with that internet video is about to like.
right,
And I was genuinely surprised they snubbed him, just even for a
yeah,
nomination, because the writing of that film is like, I don't play tennis, so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe
yeah.
there's I was like, this is amazing. Like I can't believe I enjoyed a tennis movie. And it's more of a tennis movie than
It's
uh
more of a sports movie than you would think.
they
Yeah,
advertise
because
it as like this love triangle sexy movie, and it's not that. It's
yeah,
it's a sports movie.
yeah, it does have some very sexy moments.
Yeah.
But I mean, in the end, it's really about friendship,
Yeah.
um, and rekindling that friendship after years of not,
Yeah.
seeing each other, and in a way, there's like that sort of love triangle aspect of it. But yeah, that's not the most important part of the movie. It's just it's this the it's hard to describe exactly what I like about the movie other than to say that there wasn't a movie that I saw last year that just kind of affected me on
Mm,
an emotional level like that one did. Like, and I
okay.
think it was the friendship between the two guys that
Oh.
really hit me, which is interesting because, like, I wouldn't normally think that that's something that would really kind of affect me so much. But it did. And that surprised me. And I'm not easily surprised. And I'm not a very emotional guy to begin with. And so when something can affect me that
Yeah.
way, to me, that's a successful movie. And
Yeah.
honestly, like Guadagnino has been able to do that with all of his
Yeah.
films. Like
Yeah.
this guy has a very distinct voice. He has a way in communicating his vision, and it's all about these like really nuanced relationships, whether they're romantic or not. But yeah, I just really love that movie, and I thought it was great. But on a technical level, the cinematography was fantastic. It was a beautiful looking movie, just the way they shot it on film, and then I also like it was also in terms of editing, it was one of my favorite movies of the year.
So
It's
sharp.
perfect editing,
Yeah.
just the
Perfect. Yeah.
way, yeah.
Sorry.
So,
You got me all
yeah,
excited about
I
editing.
know, I know.
It was a very sharply edited film, and I'm happy you mentioned cinematography too. There's some great shots at the end where like they shot it through glass, like from below, and the
Mm.
ball's just
Yeah.
hitting, and yeah,
Yeah. Very, very good stuff. Good movie. Again, like disappointed a bit that, it didn't get more recognition than it did. But you know what? These awards are just
yeah,
awards, right?
yeah,
Like sometimes they matter, sometimes they don't. I mean, certainly they're going to matter to the people who make the films, in terms of like, changing the trajectory of their careers and all of that. But in terms of like the 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 larger like grand scheme of like, film as art and all of this stuff, um you know these aren't necessarily the movies that we're going to remember,
yeah,
you know and we've talked about this
yeah,
at length. It's just you can remember in the last 10 years the movies that really stuck with you and the movies that will continue to stick with you. And it's not always the Oscar winners, whether it's best picture or best cinematography or whatever.
yeah,
Um, there's going to be movies that are indie films that weren't nominated for anything that nobody really even knows about. And then there's going to be the big blockbuster films as well that from known directors like Stanley Kubrick that would never win an
right.
award. It's just, so what
That's
does it
true.
really mean in the grand scheme of things? Very little. It's like the Super Bowl. It's fun to watch, and
Yeah.
it's fun to see your team win. But to anyone that's outside of the nominees, it's not going to really like affect us on a personal level.
The Kubrick's sole Oscar for the best special effects
Yeah,
in
2001.
one, which I think
Yeah.
they just created the category because of it,
Yeah, I
right?
think they invented it for him
Yeah,
because like
yeah.
this is so fucking good. We
Like,
have to just give
dear
you an
Lord.
Oscar for this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
I would say here I have. There's one honor in filmmaking to me is truly, and that's to be part of the Congress National Registry of Films, whatever it's
yeah,
called. It's like where they preserve films that are like culturally and artistically
yeah,
important. They preserve in some, I don't know,
hmm,
some underground bunker somewhere. To me, I'm like,
yeah,
to have an effect on culture that they need to preserve this just in case. I'm like that's
yeah,
that's that's up there. That's
yeah,
to me that's the
yeah,
about as high as an honor as you can get.
yeah. And I would add to that. It's also important. Like, well, maybe not as important, but it feels really good when you get recognition from your peers.
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
I think that,
I would never turn
some,
down an Oscar. I'm be honest.
right.
Like it's nice to
And
be recognized. Yes, of
and
course.
again,
Yeah.
that is mostly recognition from your peers.
Yeah.
But like, if you're like getting like an ASC award or a SAG award or something like that, and it's like your direct peers that are
Yeah.
voting, like, hey, you made the best thing this year. I mean, there's got to be like, to a certain extent, like, I mean, is Timothy Chalamet winning the SAG award this
Mm,
year, in some ways is more important
yeah.
than Adrian Brody's Oscar win,
Yeah.
right? Because that was his direct peers, all the
Yeah.
actors that said, you made the best performance of this year. And so there's something to be said about those awards as well. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's fun. Award season, it's
Yeah.
fun. It's fun to see the nominees. It's fun to watch all of your favorite movies. You know, the award show itself, often isn't the best thing to watch. I don't know how you watched it this year, but I watched it on Hulu and it fucking sucked.
Oh.
Um, just the technical problems of Hulu. Like I couldn't get it working on almost any device. It just kept getting errors. And finally I got it working on my wife's cell phone. I'm like, oh, I get to watch it on her fucking iPhone.
Jesus.
Such bullshit. And then right at 7:30 they cut it off. So didn't get to see the last couple of awards. I'm like, you know what? Fuck this shit.
Yeah,
It's
that
just
sucks.
if I would have known, I would have just, gotten YouTube TV or something like that for a month. But at this point, I don't watch TV very often, so it's
Right.
like I don't pay for it. It doesn't make sense to me. I just don't have a lot of time to watch TV, so
Yeah.
I'm like, why am I going to pay for something? extra when I'm already paying for Hulu, then I can watch this way. Yeah, it was a total disaster,
Yeah. I watched
unfortunately.
it. I had Sling that expired the next day. So it was my last day
Yeah,
of Sling. So I was able to
nice.
just watch it, which was great.
It
Um,
worked out.
but for the same reason, I unsubscribed from Sling. Not that just because I'm not watching it enough. It doesn't make sense to pay $50 a
Yeah,
month. So yeah, we watched. We had a little Oscars party. Filled out ballots.
yeah,
It
nice.
was yeah, it was it's good. It's nice to I used to be very oh the Oscars
Yes,
trying mid 20s oh I'm so
yeah,
above this, and now I'm like, oh, no, I mean, it's
right.
nice, it's still nice, it's nice to
Yeah,
celebrate good movies. It's nice that these people try so goddamn hard to do stuff and
yeah,
there's always some fun surprises. I'm happy they've kind of tried to dial in the ceremony to be shorter and just about just give
hmm
people awards. It doesn't need to be some sort of cultural
yeah.
moment. Just enjoy that's what the films are supposed to be for in the beginning. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, it seems like every year I mean, you're never going to make everyone happy that's
yeah,
watching these
yeah,
things or that are submitting films to these things, right? You never really know like what where the industry is going to be at, you know?
yeah,
I mean, some people are really good at um predicting the way that these things are going to turn out, but it just seems like there's a lot of inconsistencies from year to year. Sometimes
for
you get a
sure.
bigger blockbuster,
Yeah,
sometimes it's like this year you get a Nora that's an indie film. So it's honestly, it can be very surprising in terms of like what movies are actually nominated. But to me, overall, the biggest win this year is just for Celluloid. I mean, I think it
yeah,
was like 7 out of the 10 Best Picture nominees were shot on
yeah.
film, and you got to be happy about that. And I'm a big champion of film. I love film, and so seeing that, I've been hearing for years and years that film is dying, digital is taking over, but you know, movies like Honora and Brutalist and some of the others were
Yeah.
all shot on film, and so it's awesome to see that making a comeback for sure.
I think people just love, there's just thing human beings do. They love pointing at stuff and being like, it's gonna die.
Right.
I called it.
Yeah.
I called it, and then it doesn't
Yeah.
die. People still love vinyl. People, we were just talking about this, and even to the colleagues that we kind of work on films with, we have a little 4-person film group.
Yeah.
We Caleb and I try to present this idea of holding on to Blu-ray and DVD
hmm
rights when we license or distribute a film, and just handling that ourselves. Getting some
hmm
nice prints made up, and for people who really want to buy it, the $20, and then that's all
Yeah.
money that we keep instead of, and you mail it out. Of course, there's some of that, but
Yeah.
it's all money that we keep, and because I do think, and this has already happened a little bit, I know where there's a little bit of an industry still for Blu-rays, and the
hmm
more these streaming services get, um, more and more expensive, the more people are going to be like, well, it would be nice to just own a Blu-ray and never have to think about this.
Yeah, I mean, not just more expensive, but shittier in general,
Yeah,
especially when it comes
yeah,
to movies. I
yeah,
mean, the focus is on television series and stuff like that, and there's so many good TV series out there now, but like, you look at the quality of films on something like Netflix. Obviously they're producing their own films, but also just in terms of just their catalog, their archive
yeah,
of films to watch is just getting worse and worse over the years. And so a lot of times you find a movie you really like, and you add it to your favorites on there, and this is the same whether it's Amazon Prime or whatever, and then you go to watch it and it's gone.
yeah,
And it's because they get the rights for it for a certain amount of time, and then if nobody's watching it, they're aware of the it costs too much for them to get the extend the rights to it. It's just gone. And so yeah, I mean, but Blu-ray and 4K Blu-ray is, if you're a film lover, that's really the way to go.
yeah,
And it's a collectible item. It's something that that helps. the film industry when you buy these things, because you know for decades, home video was the way that studios were making
Yeah.
money once it leaves the theater. But now that less and less films are going to the theater, they're just not making as much money. So they go straight to streaming, and then they're not making shit. They're not
Yeah.
making anything. And and this if this is happening to studios, imagine what's happening to indie filmmakers.
Like us.
And
For
yeah,
about
exactly.
pie gets, I don't know, anywhere between like 5 to 15 cents an hour it's watched on
Yeah,
the subscription VOD, so SVOD. AVOD is
yeah,
better, but because the advertiser, this like crazy
yeah,
idea. Let's like show
right,
movies that for free, but there's
right,
advertising in the middle of it. Like,
yeah. Yeah, this whole, like, we're reverting back to
yeah,
how television was,
yeah,
network TV, where everything was paid for by ad dollars. But the only difference is like the producers are probably making a small fraction of
yeah,
something off of these, but like, the actors aren't making anything, the crew's not making anything, nobody's making like back end you know uh money off of this stuff anymore. And so like I don't know, I think we'll have to get into this a little bit
yeah,
more detail on another episode. But really, uh, theatrical and Blu-ray is still the prime ways to make money in the film industry.
yeah,
Whether you're studio or indies, and like I just said, getting an indie film in a theater is extremely difficult, if not
yeah.
impossible. And so, if you're just gonna go out there and dump your movie onto Amazon Prime, don't expect to make really anything on it. But if you can, yeah, like you mentioned, if you can retain those Blu-ray rights, those media rights, and sell it that way, there's still a really good profit margin on that stuff, and you can make some money on
And it's a big
that.
world out there, and you never know.
Yeah,
Like it's you know, industries change, things come back into demand, and it changes
yeah,
every day.
yeah.
I would like to. This is almost this episode is turning into like a pilot of sorts because we're going to
Right.
end with the title of the episode. Sorry, the
Yeah.
title of the podcast. It's like we're
Mhm.
introducing the idea at the very end, so they can
Yes.
just go and keep listening to it,
Yes.
um, knowing the actual title. And without further ado,
Oh, what did we agree on?
nailed it.
The
Okay,
yes.
we're
Okay.
this is the rough cut with Kaleb and Josh, or Josh and Kaleb. We'll just,
One or the other.
we'll just switch it back and forth, but
Yeah.
welcome to the rough cut.
Yeah. And so, like
Literally
I
starting
mentioned,
with a rough cut.
it's very rough.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we're just gonna get on here, you know, once or twice a month,
Yeah.
and just kind of talk about what's going on with our projects, and anything else that's going on movie related. If we
Yeah.
see a good movie or something like that, we'll talk about it. And anything else industry related. And hopefully we can get some guests on here too at some
Yeah.
point, whether filmmakers or anybody else who's involved in the industry that can chat with us. So that's kind of the loose goal at this point. But really, it's just another excuse for me to chat with you,
Yeah.
Josh. That's really what this is.
We were already doing this. There's just a nicer
Yes,
microphone now.
yes, slightly nicer equipment than just using your AirPods.
Yeah.
So,
And I won't have to set it up again the second time. Or I
it's
will. I
just
don't know.
yeah, just leave it plugged in
I
or
should probably
not.
just
It's
leave it
just
right here.
yeah, it's just
I should do
yeah.
my next
That's
Zoom meetings at work just like this.
I mean,
See
why
if they
not?
see if they
They'll
say anything.
they'll think you're more professional and give you a raise.
Ha 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 ha. You're funny.
Yes, I know. It's true. All
All
right.
right.
Well, do you want to close us out?
Signing off from the rough cut. We'll
All
see
right.
you next month.
Or next time.
Next time.
Next time. All right. Bye bye,
Bye
everyone.
bye.